So we had a slight change of plan on our car ride home yesterday. Eve and Salina were sitting in the back of the car I was driving, and they were talking, and I suddenly thought it'd be really wonderful for Salina and Eve to talk for you, and for Salina to interview Eve. Salina, of course, was our first composer in residence in 2001, and we've heard music of hers twice in the festivals already, with Reflect on viola, Bryony played in Bannockburn, and then last night Hikari with the wonderful Alexi. And Salina has just returned from a 4-month, almost, tour, or sabbatical almost, in the Europe and the States. And she just had, how many pieces were in the ballet?
Oh, 3.
3 of her pieces were danced to by the Seattle Ballet recently. So she's hitting the big lights around the world. And I'm not going to say any more, because I'm sure Salina can say more about her relationship with Eve as well. So of course, Eve is our fantastic composer in residence this year, and we've been hearing music from her all the way through the festival, and tonight we've got Undercurrents, tomorrow we have Tumbling Strains with cello and violin, and on Sunday we have the full commission that Eve has written for clarinet, violin, viola and cello, which I'll be playing on Sunday. So you're in for a treat with the things that are coming up, and I'm going to hand over to Salina and Eve to have a conversation with you.
Thank you, Justine.
Thanks, Justine. Hi, everyone. I've never done this before. I've been interviewed, but it's a real honour to be sitting next to wonderful Eve, who I've known for, I just realised recently, 10 years ago, Eve was my mentor at the Nelson Composers Workshop, which is when I feel like we sort of became friends, and of course we've seen each other many times over the years, and it's so wonderful to have Eve in our composerly community.
Thanks, Salina. I think I tried to poach you that year. Well, that's what I remember, that you go to what used to be called the Nelson Composers Workshop, and you see some likely young composer, and I said, why don't you come and study with me in Auckland? You know, and then you feel bad for wanting to poach them. Anyway, it didn't work, but...
I think I was already finished studying at that point.
Okay.
Anyway.
Fair enough.
So as Justine mentioned, I was composer in residence the first time this happened, 2021, which was 3 concerts, and it's been so amazing to see this festival grow and grow each year. I can't remember how many programs in this festival this year, but there are many of your pieces.
Yes, it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Such a privilege. I mean, unparalleled, I think I was saying last night, for a composer, probably in the Southern Hemisphere, to have such a variety of pieces curated, with my help actually, come to think of it, and performed by such good performers.
Yes, it's really like a dream opportunity.
Yes, it really is, and in stunning surrounds, and to get a holiday at the same time. It's very unusual.
Yes, a real treat. I think it's also a really amazing way to get to know one composer's work, and to hear all these different pieces that have been written at different points in someone's career.
Yes.
I know that your pieces have been written across maybe 4 decades, or since the 80s.
Yes, since 1987.
Right.
Undercurrents.
That's the one we're hearing
has been playing tonight.
Yes.
Yeah.
When I did this 3 years ago, I really felt, and whenever I hear pieces of mine, it sort of takes me back to when I wrote them, because it in some way is a snapshot, or it's sort of a memory of that time, and it takes me back to whatever I was experiencing at the time, or what I was going through, where I was, people in my life, all kinds of things. And I wondered if that's the same for you, and maybe whether hearing these pieces now has brought up any kind of memories or maybe moments in your life or career that you might want to share with us.
Yes, thanks, Salina. They certainly do. This one, Undercurrents, 87, I would have been doing my master's degree, perhaps something like that. And I wrote it and dedicated it to my father, who then, as it were, didn't die till 2016. But he played the clarinet when I was a child. He was a medical guy, but he played in the Otago University capping band, and he'd play sometimes at home. And I was just joking with Julian Bliss before that Dad looked a bit like a clarinet. He was a tall, thin guy in a dark suit, you know, from what I remember as a child, playing the clarinet, and that very distinctive, beautiful, mellifluous tone I've always loved. And also, as we'll hear in the Brahms tonight, a real melancholy. If you want it, the clarinet will do it superbly. And so I dedicated it to him. I remember writing it. I remember because it begins with a thing that I think only clarinetists can do really well, and that's an niente attack, an attack which is the beginning of the note from nothing. And people say, no, violins can do it. Yes, but as soon as the bow hits the string, there is a sound. So, but clarinets can literally blow and from nothing have a sound growing out. And I remember doing that. And it gets quite histrionic in style, and I've always liked to write virtuosically. I don't know what. I think it's because I like to test what the instrument can do dynamically, and also through its range. I think, well, you might as well use the Chalumeau range in the clarinet, for example, and its very high range. And you might as well get it playing very fast and very slow. It seems a shame not to do all that. And I've done that in most pieces with most instruments, I think.
So that's the earliest piece, right?
Yes.
Yes, and then I'm curious to hear whether there's been a gradual or any kind of change in your approach over time, or things that, new interests over time, or...
Sure. It's got harder and harder to be a composer. Not necessarily to be one, because once you get a bit of a name, then people will ask you for stuff, which is great, and pay you, which is even better. But it's got harder and harder. And I think I know why, and it's quite a subtle thing, but something that people might be interested in. So, mental health-wise, I'm a bipolar person, and I'm not the only composer who's bipolar. And I'm medicated. And medication means that it slightly dulls down your emotional response to things. And when I look back, a lot of the pieces being done at this festival, Tumbling Strange, Split the Lark, Undercurrents, Commemoration, were written pre-medication. And that meant that I wrote in an untrammeled way, because I'm a person who feels things very strongly. Well, you never know what other people are feeling, do you? But certainly I have very strong, intense feelings. My music is fairly intense. So when you're medicated on antidepressants and mood stabilizers, you have those things sort of suppressed. And that to me explains why I feel as though I can't quite get the intensity of those earlier pieces, which I think is interesting, because I know from reading about bipolar people that some people can't cope with being medicated. They want to get that rush back of feeling excited and sort of adrenaline filled. So that's interesting. And I think as you get older, it's hard to keep doing what you once did when you didn't know so much, as it were. So you get older and you've got little voices sitting on your shoulder and kind of inhibitions, whereas I think when you were younger or as a student, you just write stuff. And I remember just stuff coming out and I wasn't really thinking beyond it, I don't think. But, I mean, I'm interested in artists, particularly interested and influenced by visual art. And I made quite a study of this John Reynolds behind us. What a fantastic piece. It's not unlike one of my works. It's how I think about things. And it's quite masterly because your eye is drawn to this pink cross here, but then it keeps sending you down this way to which is the busiest, what's behind the speaker, the busiest part of the, I was going to say canvas, which it might as well be. And so your eye keeps going back and forward, not so much along that way. And he's a senior artist of some repute, and he will have designed the whole thing to work in that space, and that's what we as composers are doing, is to organise sounds through time. And that's what I think I'm, if anything, quite good at, taking a duration and writing a piece to fill it.
Yes, I was actually going to ask, because I know you have a big interest in visual arts, it plays a big role in your music. You have a background as a designer.
Well, I was trained as a graphic designer, but so far back that for anyone amongst you who remember things like bull gum and being a paste-up artist, that's how I trained, with letraset and rubbing down letters. Nothing to do with computers. And that was fun, but I couldn't. I'm not an artist. I moved to music for that, I think. Yeah.
I also love your way with words. I love your titles. I know you mentioned yesterday you did comedy. I'm just curious, yes. You have many, many talents and interests, and I wondered what it is about music or sound. You mentioned about duration, but is there anything else that you'd like to share about sound or music that keeps you coming back?
Well, I don't think I'm one of those, you might be one, Salina, a sort of born composer, whose vocation it is to be one. I'm not that person. And I used to think I was. And then I reached a stage about 5 years ago thinking, it's too hard. It's too hard. I don't enjoy it much. This is very much behind the scenes. I don't enjoy it much. It's difficult. Why am I doing it? And I had a conversation down here with someone who was a bit similar. And once you get to that thinking, you start opening up to other things. And since I took early retirement from university a few years ago, I mean, that had been a long job for me, 25 years. In point of fact, I did all three of my degrees, BMus, MMus, DMus, at Auckland University, and then got a job there. So I really never left there, which was fine because it went very quickly. And now that I've left, I'm a freelancer, but it means I can take acting classes and have a bit of fun doing stand-up and kind of just open up a bit. And I've been doing some performances, because you're a performer, you're a composer who's also a wonderful performer, but I'm not. I can't play an instrument to save myself. So I've started performing. I performed with From Scratch, if you know that New Zealand percussion group, the other day, and I did a thing with ringing crystal glasses and intoning the names of past relatives, and then vocalising, and that was a very rewarding thing to do. So it's that kind of thing, I think. And as you get older, you're not so worried, about what people think, or what else is one less worried about, just about what you do, you know?
Well, yeah, that's why actually I was quite surprised to hear you talk about it becoming harder and harder, and talking about these voices on your shoulders, because I wasn't sure.
Them.
Yeah, but I wasn't sure whether those diminish over time or not. It sounds like maybe a bit of both in some ways.
I don't know whether Gillian Whitehead has them, for example. I say that because some people here will know Gillian, and she's our senior living composer, let's say, and she is resonant and individual and, what other words, Elizabeth, apply to Gillian? Kind of visionary.
Yes, she's herself.
Yes. So I don't think she's sitting there thinking, oh dear, though. That's not the impression I get. But I think the rest of us possibly are, and it's just possibly John Reynolds was thinking, oh dear. I don't know. It's hard to know whether he was thinking. He probably wasn't thinking, is it too bright? But he was possibly had misgivings. I think if you don't have some sort of sensitivities and misgivings about what you do as an artist, there's something a bit wrong. You want to have, I think, a kind of quiet confidence, but not too much. Otherwise you'll be too pleased with yourself and you won't be able to be self-critical, which is crucial, absolutely crucial.
Yeah, I totally get the self-critical thing. I hadn't thought about it as these kind of external voices or what any particular person would say, so I was quite curious when you talked about that yesterday.
Yes, self-criticism, you don't want, because we as women, and I've taught enough students over enough decades to know that it's not just female students who do feel the lesser, but in general, female students won't push themselves forward. We had a bit of a talk about this in the car, about applying for jobs, and certainly it's known at university that men will always put themselves forward for promotion before they think they're ready, and women famously wait beyond when they're ready. Full stop.
Yeah, it's been amazing to have people like Eve and Gillian to look up to as young women composers. I think there are many wonderful young women composers in New Zealand, but we're still very outnumbered, I think.
Sure.
So anyway, it means a lot to have mentors and people in our community.
Oh, good.
Yes. I'm curious, I'm really excited to hear that you're trying out new things like comedy and what was the other thing you mentioned?
Oh, acting classes.
Yeah.
They really, I think in life we think we're, what do we think? We think other people do that thing. We think that, oh yes, but I can't do that, that's other people do that. And then actually you find that doing things are just an extension of what you've done yourself. So stand up the other day, really in the small club it was just an extension of giving a lecture, but making it a bit funnier. Because, we're used to getting up there and commanding the floor, and I sort of crack jokes in class and you can never quite tell, well, what you don't want to do is crack the same joke to the same class, and it's not often a good joke, but so that's an extension really of lecturing, stand-up, really. And we all have funny friends, and you think, gee, I've said to people, you'll be fantastic, you're so funny, and they say, oh, I could never do that. The most unlikely extroverted people reckon they could never do stand-up. So I find all that interesting. And as for acting, that's the same sort of thing. If you can get up on a stage and teach a class and get up in the town hall and give a pre-concert talks, you can more or less get up and do anything. Except dance, or sing, or play.
I'm curious whether this sort of energy towards trying new things, is that reflected in any upcoming projects or things that are there things musically that you want to keep exploring, or new things you want to do, any dream projects at this point?
Gosh, no, that does sound terribly boring. I mean, I've met players here at this gig who I would be very keen to write music for example. And I'm also composer in residence at the moment with Orchestra Wellington, with Mark Today, wonderful conductor, musician there. And so that's been part of this year, and I've written a piece for December, so that's coming up. So I haven't necessarily looked with many things beyond this year, because one's a bit reliant on commissions. I've got a couple of music projects which aren't commissions, but no, I don't have big dream projects like my friend Victoria Kelly, another person you might know. She's big on big projects and opera, and I'll do this huge thing. I'm not someone who thinks big with projects like her and John Pasakis and these sort of characters.
I'm really curious about these recent, well, actually, at any point in your career, if your approach to beginning a new piece has changed, or I'm not sure if I have asked you before about your process in terms of, you mentioned earlier you're not a performer, you don't play instruments very much, or...
Well, I got my ATCL on the piano,
right.
So that was reasonable, but I had to sit it 3 times to get it. So that tells you quite a lot.
Do you approach new pieces from an instrument or not, or does it change?
I think now it's easier to get into a work because I tend to know what the instruments can do, apart from, say, the guitar or the organ, certain instruments I haven't written for yet. And beginning pieces is quite easy. It's just that impetus for an initial sound. I think beginnings and endings are quite easy. It's just all the stuff in the middle, which is most of the piece. That's the difficult stuff, and that's what I find difficult. It's that moving a thing from a strong initial idea and moving it through, because I don't rely on tonality, so I've never written music in a key, which I don't know if that surprises people. I wouldn't be very good at that, because I've done that a little bit. I wrote an opera about Len Lai, a wonderful New Zealand artist and kinetic sculptor, and I had to write dances in that, and I found that hard to write kind of dances. I had to look up the rhythm, and I had to figure out what to do in a key, and yet that's most of the music we listen to is tonal, to a fault. So I think I have a very strongly developed sense of colour and texture. I think I've sometimes made students laugh by saying I'm not very musical. By that I mean I don't have a strong feel for harmony, for rhythm, for melody. What else is there? But I'm big on instrumental colour and texture and timbre and gesture and dynamics. So those have sort of saved the day. But in terms of when I was a music student and they made us recognise inverted triads, Because I was a bit older when I went to university and I'd done graphic design, pumped petrol and done all sorts of fun jobs, I came in and they said, what's this tried, which inversion's it in? I thought, what do you mean inversion? So I didn't know about that kind of thing. And sight singing, the horrors of having to sight sing. Now I can make a fist of it, but all those things I think musicians took for granted, particularly in those days. So that's funny looking back. In terms of what you have to get to know what you're good at, and perhaps not so strong at. And that takes a while to be confident enough to say, actually, I'm not so good at harmony. My version of harmony, well, I don't know what it is, but do you see what I mean? I don't know whether you have any weaknesses. No apparent ones.
No, I'm really surprised to hear all of this from you. Well, I think you're wonderfully musical and strong and all those things that you mentioned.
Well, I have my own versions of them, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, which makes me curious just because the way that I got into composition and I often get into pieces is through playing, so I'm always really fascinated to know actually how it works for other composers that don't approach it like that, and whether you're trying things out mentally, whether you have software to play things back, how, just to get a bit technical here, I'm just curious, the actual process of, do you write things down by hand completely first, or?
Yes,
Yeah.
but the inklings of ideas are sonic, they're inside. I don't think, I'll just try that out and have to find it. I always think of them. I'm just thinking of the orchestral piece I've just written. Funnily enough, that piece I've written most of it on Sibelius, on the music on the computer, which is a first. Given when I started out, like most composers of my generation, we all wrote with pencil on manuscript, and then who said yes? I thought I heard someone saying yes. Was it my sibilance speaking? And then we did the good copy with ink. And so we did. And I think that's where anyone sort of my age and older, have a different approach to composing, because you had to hew it and carve it out by hand. So you literally thought, okay, so the cello, pick up the bow, and then do this. Oh, is it going to be an up bow or a down bow? And where will it be? And the decisions that come with, composing is basically a whole litany of decisions, isn't it? And with teaching, a student rocks up, so you open what they're doing on the computer and you say, what's this? Solo cello. Oh, crotchet equals 120. So I then pretend to be a cellist, which they hadn't thought of doing, but they soon will. And I say, pick up the bow and see if you can play that tempo. And it sounds obvious, but really, computers have been the bane of a lot of music. Partly, you've all heard of cut and paste. And you can write bars of music, and it's extremely effective to pick up those 2 bars and dump them somewhere else, and then repeat them again, and then move them up a 5th, which works quite well. And before that, you had to kind of work speedily with a pencil and to think in that way. But what computers did, because of course I remember when they first came in, was you go in and you start a piece, and it fills all these pages with 4/4. So it's very hard to think of something that goes against the grain of a thing that starts in 4/4 and then does a bit of 3/4. Think of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. It doesn't stay in one time signature for long. It's all over the place. So it would be very hard to come up with that on a computer. So I've taught myself to have that happen on the computer.
Yes, I feel
But-
like I've spent quite a lot of time with students trying to get them out of that grid of
Exactly.
4/4, which didn't used to exist.
Exactly.
And yeah.
you know, you say to them, why have you changed that at the end of the bar line? Well, it's because the bar line's there. Bar lines. I had a wonderful teacher. He died years ago. Douglas Muse. I don't know if you know the late Douglas Muse. Senior, that is. There's a junior. And even the junior's getting a bit older. But he said he came into the room and in his unmistakable Newfoundland accent, he said, there are no bar lines in music. Who taught you that? And I thought that was one of the most brilliant things I'd ever heard. And I never forgot it. Because bar lines are just a strange kind of construct to keep groups of players in time.
Yes, I got my students to write pieces just by pencil and paper,
Yes.
right from beginning to end.
No bar lines.
For voice, and just really try to encourage them not to think in those
That's
grids
right.
because it's just so limiting. And
That's
so I've
right.
wondered about how different the mentality
Yes.
before all of that has been. And
Well,
I've loved seeing your
yeah.
beautiful handwritten scores,
Well,
and you
that's
can
another
feel,
thing. That's
yeah.
another thing. I get a little bit more shaky for various reasons, not dangerous reasons now. So it's very hard to keep a steady hand because, writing music out by hand, which is a lovely thing to do. The one thing that is a giveaway are long beams. So do you know a guy called George Crumb, American composer, fantastic? People look at his scores and think they're printed, and in fact they're handwritten. They are the most fantastic scores. He's gone in there and handcrafted all the sounds. Anyway, I just mentioned him as being an extraordinary exponent of handwritten. Because it's a shame that it doesn't happen anymore. Because when we look at Bach's manuscripts and even our own Douglas Lilburn wrote with a very poignant kind of back to front, back to front quavers with the stems on the wrong side of the notes. Isn't that right, Elizabeth? Well, anyway, something like that. Because seeing people's autograph, music handwriting, tells you a huge amount about them. You think of Beethoven, Mozart's handwritten scores. Yeah.
I'm curious, you mentioned George Crumb. I'm a big fan of George Crumb as well, and I wondered if there were other composers or influences that are particularly important to you or that you might like to mention.
Not anymore. I don't listen to music for influences anymore, but I used to, particularly when I was a student. The greats of the century are all the guys, and they were mainly guys who I cut my teeth on. Messiaen, the greatest composer of the 20th century, 21st. Which one are we in? No, we're in the 21st. Haven't had time to pick that person yet. Ligeti, I think probably more than anyone informed my kind of sense of, not absurdity so much as welcoming a sense of humour, which in music isn't to do with ha ha ha, it's more to do with the depth of a sort of, perhaps a generosity of spirit, a spiritedness that you hear in certain composers, Lyle Cresswell, the late Lyle Cresswell perhaps, Lutosławski, who we'll hear tonight. Those sort of people were influences on me. But after a while, I kind of gave up being influenced and just did my own thing.
Actually, I wanted to ask you about humour because I think you do that so wonderfully in your works, and I think it's quite unique, or I can't think of other composers that in New Zealand that sort of have, you mentioned Lyle Cresswell, but I particularly love the way that you do that in this really sincere and adventurous way, and I wondered if you could tell us any more about how you like to think of humour in...
How do you think it appears? What does it appear as to you?
Oh, the word that came up yesterday was quirky. I like to think of quirky, adventurous, just this different way of communicating with the audience.
I think it's a personality thing. You are what you write in terms of music, and I mean, I think I appear to be quite a serious person, but I'm not really. There's that, because people think I look scary and forbidding. I think it's because I'm tall and have an angular face or something. But I think with music, I mean, if you look at any composer, if you look at Haydn, for example, Mozart, it's a sense of gesture, and it's a sense of when to take yourself seriously or not. And I think is it a kind of flippancy? I don't know, because I can't imagine writing in a way that's not personal. Certainly if you try to be funny in music, I've had students want to do that, and to be ironic, and I've said you have to be really clever to do something kind of nudgy and ironic. That's quite difficult. So I think it does come naturally to me.
Nice. I'm curious about, am I allowed to ask you about the new piece, or is that for the next talk?
Well, it is a bit for the next talk. Yes.
One more minute, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we wrap up now? Okay, all right. Or should we take one question from the audience?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Henry.
What's the role of intuition when you're composing? In that, with the pieces that have appeared to compose themselves and the pieces that you've really had to struggle with, would there be any differences in their personalities at large? And how would they correspond to their characters, if there's any difference at all?
Hang on, there's 3 questions in there, Henry.
Oh, yeah, I think I found a loophole on that.
The role of intuition in composing is everything. 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 You can't think, I think I'll get my brain to order this music in such a way that it will begin here and end there. It doesn't work like that. It's intuition, even though it sounds flaky and female and all those other qualities. It is what musicians are basically doing, working away on a thing that's got some plan, that the intelligence is using the intellect and whatever other skills, but your intuition, your feelings, which are never wrong, are guiding you.
All right, I think we have to wrap up. Thank you so much, Eve.
Thank you very much.